Welcome to Femme Parler Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Shirley Altador, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. Welcome back to another episode of Femme Parler Podcast. And today for story time, we have a special guest. We have Brooke, who is a functional nutritionist. Brooke and her amazing team of women specialize in women's health and changing the narrative for women and how they view their life, their health, and their bodies. Brooke, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Wonderful. Excited to have you. So I'm going to pass you the mic so you can add on so the listeners can know what else you do, who you are.
Yeah. So what the biggest thing that brought me to what I do now is I'm 35 and I have 2 kids, and I feel better in my skin now than I ever did in my 20s. And I've been in this industry for 14 years. And, when you're younger, I think you have different priorities, different focuses, but I really have evolved with how and why I view nutrition differently. And a lot of it came from personal experiences and then things that I was seeing transferred into my clients and things that they were experiencing as well. When I was a kid, I was overweight, and I remember how awful it felt like to have other people saying things about you. And just, I, at a young age, really experienced what it was like to not feel good in your skin and to not feel confident in who you are and to have this I guess insecurity in my outward, appearance. And something that I hope, no younger kid should ever have to experience, but I really remember that and it ingrained in me. And going into middle school, kids can be meaner. I did lose the weight, but I still never lost that insecurity in myself. And went into high school, and just like most teenage girls, the idea of dieting, we see our moms dieting, and my mom was on like Metabolife and Jenny Craig and Slim Fast shakes. And, I call it like the snack rolls generation is when I kind of grew up. It was always fat-free everything in our house. And it was kind of this message that was constantly ingrained in me of like, well, if you want to feel good, you need to diet. And that was really what I started to think. So when I wanted to look good in my prom dress, or I wanted to look good in a bikini on spring break, it was always like, okay, well, I'm dieting for these 2 weeks leading up to it and crash dieting for it. But no one was ever really talking about, like, as a woman, how your body was meant to function, how powerful your body could be. It was always, I feel like, talking poorly about ourselves and how we didn't like the way that we looked. Also, at a young age, I was experiencing PMS symptoms, and I was getting a lot of cramping, and I was put on birth control when I was about 15 to help support some of that. And that was something that I stayed on for years. And I remember feeling my weight accelerating. I was on the birth control, and I remember calling my doctor's office asking, is there something that could be wrong? Like, could this birth control be causing this? And the doctor said to me, she was like, well, there's no way. There's no way that birth control would cause that for you to gain weight. There must be something else going on. And I remember hanging up the phone, being like 17 or 18, feeling dismissed, feeling frustrated, feeling like, well, what the heck? Like, I'm not sure what I'm doing differently. Why is my body reacting this way? And it really led to, again, back to that dieting, right? I wasn't feeling good, so I went back to the dieting. And the cycle kind of continued for a while until I started to go back to school and started to become really passionate about nutrition and the impacts it can have on your body. And I was starting to really learn a lot about how my hormones were playing a role in how I was feeling. I was starting to see as a woman that there were certain times of the month that I was feeling really good, and there's times of the month where I didn't have the energy and I wasn't feeling as good. And I was starting to, in my nature, ask questions of like, well, why is this happening? And I got kind of smacked in the face and hit hard with it when I was about halfway through my career. My dad passed away, and I really felt the impacts of trauma and stress on my body. And I started to see these things kind of coming full circle of the years of constantly dieting and restricting with my body, being on the birth control when my body was clearly like screaming at me that something was wrong, and then getting hit with the trauma and stressors, and my body just kind of went haywire. And I was forced to really go inward and heal and focus on my hormonal health, focus on my gut health, focus on what was really going wrong. Luckily was surrounded by a lot of amazing physicians and dietitians at that time to help support me with it. And through that, I started to really understand how to support my body as a woman, how my hormones were fluctuating, what my body was meant to do and not meant to do. And I started to feel significantly better than I ever did when I was constantly dieting and trying to cut things down without having to put a lot of effort into it, because I was learning how to just support myself. And then I was starting to see a lot of my clients who were feeling frustrated and feeling like they were having to fight their body to get what they wanted. And I started to implement a lot of these things with my clients, and they were starting to feel the same way. It was starting to be easier to feel good in your skin. They were starting to understand how their body was meant to flow through the month. So we've really transformed a lot of how I coach women now, based on a lot of things that I saw, based on a lot of things that I felt. And then a lot of the coaches that I have working with women is now have all felt very similar things in different facets of their life as well too.
Very interesting. I wanted to ask you, so I know you said you struggled with your weight. Now, when I look at you, you don't have the look of a person that used to be overweight, but technically, what is the look, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also want you to focus on body type. You know, I'm always about women having agency of their body, being proud of their body, especially. And, you know, I'm not talking about you ladies. If you're getting the BBL, the tummy tuck, the booby jobs, do what you got to do to make you happy. That's on you. But, you know, in this day and age, this is what little girls are seeing. Like, this is how my body needs to look for it to be considered sexy. Because if you have a little fupa, then you're not sexy. If you have a little back fat or side fat, you're not sexy. So I want you to tell our listeners, what is dieting has nothing to do with body size. And I want you to get into that, because I'm a petite person in height, and me at 140, 145, I'm a little heavier for my height. I'm 4'11". So technically, based on that, what's that thing called? I think it starts with a B, like the thing that tells you based on your height how much you're supposed to weigh.
Oh, your BMI.
Yes, there you go. Thank you, my dear. Your BMI. I'm supposed to be like 118 to like 24 pounds. That's what I was before my kids. And I refuse to go back to that weight. So I want you to comment on the women who constantly feel as though they need to diet to be smaller. Because it's not about being smaller, it's about being healthy. So I want you to let those women know that there's a huge difference between that.
100%. So if I took a girl who is 150 pounds, or two girls next to each other who are 150 pounds, and one of them was 30% body fat and one of them was 14% body fat, they both weigh the same. They're going to look differently, right? But what that means doesn't necessarily matter. What I say for a woman, though, healthy body fat percentage range can be anywhere from 16 to 24%. That's a pretty big range of body fat. We don't really want to look at BMI, because BMI is just a ratio of your height and your weight. It's not taking into consideration how much lean mass you have, anything along those lines. My BMI would technically classify me as overweight because I have muscle. And then you also have to take into factor your genetics. Now, genetics doesn't always play a role, but I have long, lean legs. My dad had long, lean legs. My body type is just the tall, skinny, narrow body type, right? We have to take those things into consideration too. Some of us have more different shapes, and that's amazing. Instead of hating that about ourselves or wanting to change the way that we look, that's something for us to embrace about how we look. Health, I've seen obese and unhealthy. I've also seen really skinny and unhealthy too, right? So health doesn't have a number on the scale. Health is really when we're looking at how's your organ function? How are you feeling during the day? Are you going to the bathroom regularly? Are your hormones functioning the way they should be? Are you sleeping well at night? Do you have the energy that you want to have? That's health. That's what we should really be quantifying it off of. And then the biggest thing I always say to women too is you cannot love yourself to a different or hate yourself to a different size. You have to love yourself with where you are. And it doesn't mean you don't want to change something, improve something, whatever. But you really need to look at, well, why do I want to change this about myself? Why don't I like where I am right now? Is it that I just don't feel good? And then I think that, going back to like the old culture, that I think that dieting into a different size is going to be what's going to make me feel good. You really kind of have to assess that and ask yourself that. And instead of looking at the BMI, which is so old, and I can't believe we still use it in medical terms, it should be looking at your body fat percentage. Are you feeling good? How is your hormonal function? Are you going to the bathroom regularly? How's your energy during the day? Those are the things that we should truly be assessing on someone.
That's a great point to make. How's your energy during the day? Are you going to the bathroom regularly? And is it still technically considered you should be having a bowel movement once a day? Or is it
At
more?
least.
At least once
Yeah.
a day. And
Yeah.
what are the underlying factors of if you're not, like if you miss a day, Brooke, is that really a bad thing?
So you miss one day, right? And maybe you ate something the day before that, you know why it threw you off. It's not something you normally eat, not something I would be worried about. But if you're regularly not using the bathroom every single day, a minimum of once, ideally around twice to three times,
3 times. Wow.
yeah, it does happen.
Wow. Well, that ain't
Um,
Shirley.
well, you also have to take into consideration how much am I eating? What's my
Okay.
fiber intake like? What's my water intake like, right? Someone who is a really athletic person who's always exerting themselves is probably going to be eating more and going to the bathroom more than somebody who's not moving their body as much. So that's something to take into consideration too. But if you're not going to the bathroom, especially as a woman, pooping is a really important way that we regulate your sex hormones. So it's
What?
actually,
Okay, you're going to
yeah.
go into that some more. Go ahead.
So your estrogens and toxins themselves, we always think of like, well, I eat food and then whatever I don't need, it just gets excreted. But your digestive system actually does a lot more than that. It is important for your nutrient absorption. It's really important for toxin removal. And one of those is being excess estrogens in your body. So when you eat, your nutrients are getting sourced out to other parts of your body. If your gut health is functioning properly, anything that we don't need is getting excreted out. And then your sex hormones are getting regulated by your gut. Anything that's excess, so excess estrogens, are also getting excreted out through our gut. So if you don't poop regularly, that is essentially kind of sitting in your colon and then essentially getting recirculated in a more toxic form than it was before. So one time of that, really not that big of a deal. Your body's going to regulate it back out. But if that's repeated, and it's more the chronic times we're talking about, like having chronic constipation, I've had people who I go to the bathroom maybe every other day type of a thing. Then it's usually, okay, we probably need to pay attention to your sex hormone function then too. And that's probably why you're not going or why you're not feeling very good, because your bowels are not helping support your sex hormone regulation. It's all connected. If you think of like a triangle of function, the top of that triangle is your thyroid. One side we have your sex hormones, the others we have your adrenals, and then the center of that is your gut. All four of those things are working in conjunction with each other, but your gut's really at the center of all of that.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I never knew that not pooping regularly can affect your sex hormone. So will it make you not want to have sex? Is that how it's affecting?
No, there's a lot of different ways that it can impact you. So essentially, excess estrogen or estrogen dominance you can hear about can impact you in many different ways. So libido down the road could be something that gets impacted.
Okay.
It takes about 90 to 100 days for you to really feel an impact really in your hormones, but your libido could get impacted if your testosterone or your DHEA is low. Estrogen to you as a woman is like testosterone to a guy. So we have certain stages of the month, especially after our period leading up to our ovulation, when our libido should be higher and our estrogen is rising. We get a little testosterone boost around our ovulation as well. So there could be varying things that throw it off. But if you're not feeling that libido rise around your ovulation, that might be a sign that you want to look into your hormones as well, or that estrogen could be in an imbalance. Your estrogen and progesterone do a little dance with each other through the month, essentially. Your estrogen is higher at one stage, and then your progesterone is higher at another. And then if we don't poop regularly, if the estrogen is not getting regulated the way that it should be, I call estrogen like our queen bee. She can get a little toxic if we don't keep her in check. And then progesterone's what like helps keep her in check, essentially. So we can throw that dance off with each other.
Gotcha. So now, what exactly does functional nutritionist mean in your title?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of those names out there, right? There's functional, there's holistic, there's naturopathic. They all kind of mean the same thing. Functional just essentially means that when I'm looking at nutrition with you and how we're applying it, what we're doing, when I'm looking at your movement, I'm also taking into consideration a whole body approach. I'm looking at what is your stress like? How is your thyroid function? How is your gut health? How are your sex hormones? How's your stress? And how are we managing it? And I'm looking at all of those things together when I'm taking an individual approach to your body.
Okay. My next question for you, based on what you said, is why is diet seen so dark now? And do I feel as though, based on what you said, functional nutritionist, holistic nutritionist, is it just a more advanced word in saying diet? Because I was told that like things like if you're going to have it, have the regular, don't have the diet because the diet is bad for you. If you're going to drink soda, drink regular soda. The diet's the worst one to have. If you're going to have sugar, have the white sugar because anything else, a substitution, is not good. People say whole milk is not good, blah, 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 but they'll do skim milk or diet milk. So tell us about the diet products that they're selling. And realistically, Brooke, are the other substitutions such as almond, soy, cashew? I love oat milk. Is that stuff really truly good, or is it mind fucking with me and it's still a diet and I'm using it?
Yeah. That's such a good question. And so many women are confused and I hear it all the time. And I get it. I see it all over social media too. It can be really confusing. The biggest thing I always say is context is everything. That's what really, really matters the most. And I see the diet culture, the anti-diet culture stuff out there all the time. And I think there's a good purpose to it. The purpose of it is like, you can't hate your body into stuff. We shouldn't constantly be dieting away as women. And I think that's amazing. And I 100% agree with that. But I feel like our pendulum has swung to the complete opposite side. We went from like dieting all the time to like, nope, don't diet, don't do anything diet at all. And the truth is really somewhere in the middle where there are times and places where certain things may not be the best for someone to be taking in. If I have people who have a lot of gut issues going on, I'm probably going to need to put them on more of an anti-inflammatory based diet because they already have a lot of internal stress in their body. And I don't want to throw any more food into there that could be creating stress in their system. So in that kind of a scenario, I may not be having them eating dairy, glutens, those kinds of things. But that doesn't mean that that's for everybody and everyone shouldn't eat dairy or gluten. And then when it comes to like diet products and things like that, I rarely am ever working with a woman who's trying to like step on stage and do a bikini show and look like her absolute best, right? But there are girls who do those kinds of things, and sometimes they are going to lean towards those kinds of things. Is that something that I would choose to eat? No. I always operate out of the philosophy you want to try to eat as close to the ground as you possibly can be. So the least processed that food had to be, the better. Anytime that we're taking something and we're stripping something out of it, we have to add something to it to make it taste good. So when we take something and we make it fat-free, they're usually adding sugar to it to still make it taste good. When we take something and we make it like a diet Coke or a diet Pepsi or whatever it is, what they're doing is they're replacing that with an alternative form of that sugars to still make it taste really sweet. Otherwise, it would taste really bitter and gross. So, is that sugar? No. Is it horrible for you? I can't fully answer that, but a lot of studies would show that probably not the best. I always say just think of it as like if it had to be created by us and it wasn't created from God-given earth, right? It's probably not going to be the most recognized thing by our body. Is it the one time that you consume it? I'm not worried about it. More of like if you're consuming it all the time, then it's probably something we should swap out.
Gotcha. We're going to step away from diet and I'm going to ask you about your periods. How old were you when you got your period?
Oh, God, I was in like 6th grade. So
Okay.
is that like 12?
Same here. I was 6th grade. I had just turned 12. Now, when did the heavy cramp, you said you got on birth control at 15? Don't quote me.
Yeah.
15. So before 15, when did it start and how bad was it?
It started probably about 6 or so months before that. And, you know, just like a lot of other girls at school, I would start to hear, well, this girl got on birth control because her cramps were bad. So I should get on birth control because mine are bad too. So, you know, I think that we kind of learned like, well, that's probably the solution or what I should do. I remember when I started my period, I was in the bathroom and I didn't know what to do. I kind of freaked out a little bit and I told my mom and my mom was just like so nonchalant about it. She was like, okay, you know, like let's go get you something. And you know, she was like, do you have any questions? And I was like, I didn't know what questions to have or, you know, or what not to have. I had no idea what was going on with my body. And it was really uncomfortable. I remember in 6th grade, we would call tampons candy because we didn't want to like admit that we needed a tampon. And I was using a tampon the wrong way for like 6 months because I had no idea. Like I was putting the actual like
Plastic?
insert thing in. Yes, I wasn't like I was using it the wrong way. And I was like, God, these things hurt. Until my mom was like, what are you doing?
So I have a question for you. Then we're on the tampon question. So your mother, did she not talk to you about it before?
I don't remember being talked to about it.
No?
No.
And you're 35, I'm 39. We're not too far off in age. So we were really, truly raised around the same generation. So I'm beginning to think a large portion of our mothers suffered the same fever because my mother didn't talk about it either. You know, same as you. You got your period in the bathroom. At least you went and you told her right then and there. My mother found out 3 months after. I didn't want to tell her because I just didn't want to tell her. I didn't want to have a conversation with her.
Yeah.
She only found out because I started using her pads. My mother never wore tampons. That was not a thing. So I didn't even know what a tampon was till I got older. And it was my friend from high school who showed me how to insert it. And same as you, I didn't know how. I put the whole plastic up inside of me. And she was like, no,
Yeah.
Shirley, that's not what you do. You got to stick it up there. It's just the cotton that goes up. I was like, thank God for her because shit, I'm not getting any instructions from anybody. I don't know what the hell to do. So it gives me a sense of comfort that a lot of other people went through the same shit I went through. And you don't realize some girls really don't know how to insert a tampon.
It was a rude awakening for me when we found out we were pregnant with a girl. She's our first. And I said to my husband, I was like, I don't ever want her to feel in her body the way that I did. And he has no idea what I was talking about. And I was like, no, I remember moments of like, my mom was amazing. Don't get me wrong. She tried her best. She did the best with what she had. But I think that generation too, they just didn't know. They weren't taught anything about their body. And I think our generation really has the opportunity to change that narrative for the girls after us. And that was kind of it was really a big why behind my business when I had her, because I knew how I felt in my skin. I didn't want her to see me dieting. I didn't want her to see me talking badly about my body. I wanted her to see me eating healthy because I loved my body, not because I hated it. And I wanted her to see that as the reason that I was choosing to eat certain foods. And then the other aspect of it was periods and where babies come from and, you know, why mommy is breastfeeding our son, and like all those conversations that I just remember feeling so uncomfortable having them, feeling so uncomfortable about my body, so uncomfortable sharing certain things. And after having her, I was like, why am I feeling this way? It's just like my body's awesome. My body just produced a human and birthed it. Like, why would I feel uncomfortable about it? It just did something that nobody, like my husband's body can't create a human.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wanted her to grow up feeling really empowered being a woman and really empowered in her body. So even now with her, she's 4 years old. I have conversations age appropriate with her, but I'll tell her, like your body is amazing. And she'll ask me like, well, what, why is it so awesome? And I'll tell her, I'm like, your body can create a human and your body can birth it. And she saw me pregnant with our son. So she, she can remember, when mommy had a baby in her belly and when mommy was breastfeeding the baby. And I was like, how cool is that your body can create a human and then your body knows to produce the food for that human after you've had it.
I agree. I talk to my kids as well. They're 14. Oh God, they're 13 and 14, soon to be 14 and 15. And no matter how many times you talk to them when she gets her period, it's always going to be, I feel like, a big surprise for a girl.
Yeah.
But even to this day, I still have conversations with both my kids, and they probably think our mother is the strangest thing in town. But when they get older, they're going to realize, I said, you guys do know, and I'll randomly just tell them this. I said, you guys know you guys were breastfed, right? So if you see someone out in public breastfeeding her child, do not act strange about it and don't stare, because that was your source of nutrition at one point.
Yeah.
And they just look at me like, how many times are we going to hear this, Mom? Until you get it. And then when you get older, you'll understand and you're not going to act like a weirdo like some of these people out here. So this is how
Yeah.
I am with them, because I feel like I don't like when people act weird. Like when we're on the plane, I love when I see mothers breastfeeding their children with no shame. Okay, yeah, I can understand out of respect. We're in a tube, you're sharing a space, you want to put a little blanket, but she has no problem popping her boob out and feeding her child, because this is a source of nutrition for your child, and that's what you choose to do. That's what you choose to do. If the guy next to you or a row across feels a little uncomfortable, that's his problem. Just like when people feel uncomfortable when babies are crying, it goes along the same line. Dude, what do you expect me to do? Stuff the child's mouth? Take a chill
Yes.
pill. I can't do anything
Yeah.
about that, okay? You're sharing this space with many other people. If you are that uncomfortable, maybe you should consider private flying, because obviously commercial flying is not working for you. Sometimes that's what I want to say, but that's not what I say, Brooke. I have to watch my mouth.
Yeah.
But I totally agree. You have to talk to them at every stage of their life, age appropriate, so that way they know and they understand. And it's important. Things always have to be repeated to children and repeated to children and repeated to children. So you're going to feel like a broken record constantly saying stuff. They're going to ask you the most obscene questions at times, throw you off as they start to get older. But I'm glad that you're having these conversations with them, because they need it, and we don't do it enough as parents. My next step with these two is I'm going to be writing down all the STDs out there, and I'm going to give them a test at home. You guys are not going to say you didn't know shit when you left this house. That's what and I'm telling you, they're
Yeah.
going to think our mother is absolutely strange-o, weirdo from out of this world. But when they get older, they're going to realize why I did this, because I didn't know.
Every kid that age thinks their parents are crazy. Yeah.
Exactly. I didn't know what a yeast
Yeah.
infection was until I experienced it when I was younger, and the doctor told me, and that's when I was learning. I didn't know what a bacterial vaginosis was until after I had my first daughter, and I was 24 when I first knew what bacterial vaginosis was, which is something common that women can experience between your period, sperm throwing your pH off. Why didn't I know till I was 24? That's something that I should know, but it's simple things like that. So, and very important, continue these discussions. How old is your son?
He's 20 months. He's
Oh, he's
little.
little guy. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now we're going to step into your father passing away. Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
know it was coming?
No. He, so my dad was not one to really share, when I look back on it, I think about 6 months before he had his first sign, there was other signs. I was moving from Arizona back to Michigan. I stayed with my parents for a couple weeks at their place in Florida. And I was already in the fitness field at that point. So I was cooking. So I was cooking healthier than they normally would eat. And he came out one time and he was like, my pants are fitting looser. I think I'm losing weight. And we were kind of like, oh, well, you know, I've been here cooking healthier for the last couple of weeks. Maybe that's what it is. No one really thought anything of it. And then in March that following year, he went golfing and he got double vision when he was golfing. And was not normal for him. They went to an ocular neurologist and he was very dismissed. And the ocular neurologist was like, well, it could be this, it could be that, it could be a cancer. We don't know. They sent him home and with a medication, got way worse, came back a week later. And it was just week after week for about 4 weeks. It progressed to the point that he lost the ability to open his eye on his left side. And he was holding a mirror with his left hand and lost the ability to hold it and dropped it. And so my mom drove him up. They were in Florida to the University of Florida. And I called her. No, they were kind of downplaying to me how bad it was. And I called her and she was in tears. And I'm so happy I called her at the moment I did because I realized how bad it was. So I jumped on a plane and I flew down there. And my dad was at that point paralyzed from his hips down, couldn't walk or anything, had no function in his lower body, still couldn't open up his left eye all the way. And I walked in and they were giving him a spinal tap to see, you know, what could be going on. And I remember just seeing that and it's still, I can vividly see it. And we found out the next day that he had B-cell lymphoma. And which, if you catch it at the right time, is 100% curable. It was already in the central nervous system at that point, and we did not catch it at the right time. But at that point, you know, especially when it's your loved one with cancer, I should also say my mom was an oncology nurse. So she's seen the other side of it. She has never been a loved one in that kind of a scenario. And when it's your loved one with cancer, you don't want to believe that there's no other outlet or hope. And you want to think like, well, no, we're going to do this. We're going to fight this. And so my dad didn't want to do chemotherapy. We really encouraged him to because we didn't want to admit that there was no other avenue or anything out of that. So he did the surgery in the hospital there. We started the chemotherapy and actually things started to look good because it was taking some of the pressure off of the cancer on his spine. It was starting to go in a good direction. I flew home. And then about a week later, a good friend of our family was an oncologist and he was like, you guys need to explore hospice. So we got him into hospice. I flew back down to Florida and he developed pneumonia. He could no longer speak anymore. And we spent the last 2 days with him when he was in hospice. I would not leave the hospital room and I just laid there with him. And then he passed away it was about 5 weeks from the day that he had his first sign of something.
That was very quick. What is B-cell lymphoma?
I don't know exactly. My mom could probably explain it to you. It's a very aggressive lymphoma. It's a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Okay.
It was, to see how aggressive it was in someone was pretty horrific to watch how he went from 5 weeks earlier playing golf to being paralyzed in his lower body and not able to holding anything in one side of his face, just completely shut and not able to function.
Now, the person that you are mindful of what you're taking in, eating, trying to be control of the stress you're taking in, how did that break you, Brooke?
I didn't realize how much it did at first. My dad was like my person. He was my safety. He was my go-to. I had just met my husband at that point, so I was kind of single living on my own, and my dad was like I called my dad every day. So I think like the first little bit, I was really in shock. Like I really didn't understand what had happened. Still couldn't wrap my head around the fact that my dad wasn't going to be there. And the one moment I realized it hit me, my husband and I were starting to progress in our relationship, and I walked into Target and I picked up my phone to call my dad to tell him about my husband because I knew that he would love him. And I started sobbing in Target. And I remember this lady looked at me and I was like, I gotta go. Like, this is not good. And that was really the moment that it hit me. She probably thought I was psycho. And I just went into my car and cried, and it really like resonated with me. Um, at that point, my body had already like just started feeling the impacts of stress. I was working out harder. I was dieting more because it was really, for me, it was like the only thing I felt like I could control or have. And I was just making it worse. I was making the impacts of the stress worse in my body. So I really started to get into like breath work. Yoga was a big thing for me. I loved it. Um, and really started, I mean, I use supplements to help support my hormones as well. Walking, I had to do a major 180 in how I treated my body as far as like workouts and nutrition as well during that time.
Gotcha. How are you now? Because your daughter's 4, you aren't married. So it's been at least 4+ years since dad passed away, correct?
It's been 8, yeah.
Yeah. How are you
Almost
now?
8. So I'm good. Grief, I don't think ever leaves you,
Mm-mm.
but so oddly enough, I 100% believe God put my husband in my life right
Mm.
at that moment. My husband's the only person that I knew in my life who had lost a parent as well. He lost his mom
Wow.
when he was young. Um, and when we started getting serious, when we started talking about kids, we would always joke and say, like, okay, well, I think we're going to just have a boy and a girl. And if we do, we're going to name them after our parents. And oddly enough, that's exactly what happened. We had a girl. She is named after my husband's mom that he lost, and she has my mom's middle name. And then we had my son, and we named him after my dad. And it's so crazy how things turn around because he is the spitting image of my father. If you look at my dad's baby pictures, he is my dad to the T.
Mm.
So it's so crazy to see how those things turn around. I experience, you can have the duality of it. I experienced so much joy
Mm-hmm.
from seeing my kids, but also there's also that little bit of sadness of like, God, I wish that he was here,
Mm-hmm.
to be in these moments or to like just watch him be a grandpa, or be a part of these things. Or I remember when he was passing away, I was saying like, I want you to be able to walk me down the aisle. I want you to, do this treatment. And so to be able to have him do those things, I always wish that he was here for it. But I think you have to have a faith that there's something else, that, eventually there's going to be something else that you can have and these things kind of come together. And that's where I have to focus. But I've also had to go through there. I was diagnosed with PTSD from how I watched him pass. So I've
Mm-hmm.
also had to go through therapies and things to really like cope and go through a lot of that.
Yeah, and you're right. Grief doesn't go away. It never
Mm-hmm.
leaves you. You're never going to forget your father, and there's going to be moments that you are going to have triggers where you may go in a closet and cry, or something as simple as you're standing there folding your laundry and a memory comes back to you. Grief
Yep.
doesn't leave. Those memories are not going to go anywhere. But you're healing well, and that's good. And it's interesting. I like how you and your husband, spoke all this into fruition. You're going to have a boy and girl. You're going to name them this and do that. And that's what ended up happening. So that's great. That's wonderful. Now we're going to
Yeah.
go back to the diet thing. And I'm going to ask you, why are vegans sometimes just so mean to people? What is this thing about this vegan life that if you're not vegan, you live in a simple life? They're like the new Christians of health. Like, what the
You
hell? So
know,
what? I'm not vegan.
I'm not, I will never be vegan. It's meat. So meat is 100% amazing for your hormones, for one. But two, there's reasons that people choose it.
Hmm.
And if you're choosing it for a health reason,
Hmm.
I always ask people, I'm like, okay, well, why? Why are you choosing it for a health reason? Is it because somebody told you that it's healthier, right?
Hmm.
How about you just start to incorporate more plants into what you're eating and have that along with the meat? Um, that's one thing. And then there's the other side where it's almost like a self-righteous thing. It's almost
Mm.
very much a self-sacrifice. And I the biggest thing with veganism is I think we all actually have the very same thing. We all want better for our environment. We all want the best health. Nobody wants to see something die, but at the end of the day, we all have to look at like, to what point does it end? And I think when we look at the context, when we look at the studies, when we look at all of it, we can all look at the same study and interpret it in two totally different ways. So I think if everybody could look at any nutritional approach, whether it's veganism or any of it, and just think like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm not right about this? And what if I could be learning, and just keep an open mind? And you can stay in the way that you want to be, but that doesn't mean that the other person who doesn't eat the same way as you is wrong either. And I think that's really, if we could all take that approach towards nutrition, it would be amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you for not talking bad about them and showing me a different point of light, because sometimes they can be a bit mean. If you're not vegan, you're wrong. I'm a pescatarian. I only eat fish, and it's really by a personal choice. My son said to me, well, if meat was the only option you had to survive, would you eat it? I said, yeah, I would eat it. This is a personal choice. It's not anything where I throw on people, and I'm still eating meat. I'm never giving up fish till the day I die. I will eat that fish, catch it and eat it. And I love it, girl. But I wanted to ask you a question about myself as being anemic. So I'm anemic. I've been anemic pretty much since I was a little girl. I think when I was eating meat, it compensated for my low iron levels. Once I stopped eating meat, what I realized was happening, well, one thing that was definitely happening of me being anemic is I was having very bad stomach pains, Brooke. If I had to describe them, it was worse. It was like a cramp, and basically somebody taking my stomach and going like this, and it would have me on the floor. To this day, I really truly don't know what it was, but once I think it strongly had something to do with my iron levels being low. And when I tell you my iron levels were low, the last time I took them, which was last year in June of 2021, it was a 3. And if you know iron levels, a 3 is not a good number to be at, because that's like blood transfusion number. So my doctor was like, look, it's either you're going to take the iron pills or you're going to do these blood transfusions, because this can't continue. And of course, it has to do with my heavy periods. The first 72 days of my period, it's like a crime scene. 72 days, 72 hours. It's like a crime scene, very heavy bleeding. And it's only for the first 72 days. It's from hour 24 to hour 72. So that's one reason that my iron levels are so low. But if I had to ask you, what's one good thing that me having low iron, on top of me having to take the iron pills, as a nutritionist, that you think is a good thing? And not just for me, anybody else with low iron out there.
So iron being low is a sign that we're not absorbing nutrients appropriately. It's one of the biggest things. So I always say we need to look at gut health first. And we need to look at why are you not absorbing the nutrients appropriately. One of the best things that we can do is like a GI map assessment. It's a fecal assessment. We can see if there's a bacterial, a fungal, a yeast infection going on. We can see what your gut permeability is, which essentially, if you've ever heard of the term leaky gut, we can see if you have a leaky gut. And essentially what that means is like the cell lining. Think of like knights guarding a wall. The less knights you have guarding that wall, the more things they can get through. Think of it kind of that way. We want to have a lot of knights guarding that wall. You can start to get immune responses, food sensitivities. And if you do have that, that's where we can struggle with nutrient absorption as well. One of the other things that we can struggle with nutrient absorption from is if you don't have enough enzymes to help break down your carbs, proteins, and fats. Your digestive process actually starts from like the second you're chewing or like actually from when you smell your food, but it starts in your mouth. You digest your carbs, and then down into your stomach, and then into your small and large intestine. We break down everything else. So I would start there, but then when we're looking at adding in iron sources, there's not every vitamin and mineral is created the same. A lot of times we think like, well, iron is iron is iron, and that's actually really not the case. The absorbability is what really matters, and the way your body is meant and prefers to digest and absorb food or digest and absorb nutrients is through your food.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can get the iron from our food, and then if we could put it have like a digestive enzyme or something like that with it to help absorb, especially when we're consuming higher iron containing foods, that would be one really simple and easy thing that we could add in there. I would not say a digestive enzyme. Make sure it doesn't have any HCl or anything in it in case you do have a bacterial infection in your gut, because you will not feel good. But just a plain old digestive enzyme, make sure it has several different forms of enzymes in it, will be a great thing to add in with your food. If you're open to adding in higher iron containing, like doing eggs, if you were open to doing like chicken thighs every now and then, but eggs can also be an amazing source of iron as well. You want heme iron. Heme iron is the best absorbed form, and heme iron comes in the form of animal products. So eggs would probably be the best one in your wheelhouse to go with. And it doesn't mean you have to do them every single day, but if you did them a few times a week and had a digestive enzyme with it, that could help support as well. With iron levels that low, you're also probably going to need to supplement. Bisglycinate is a really well-absorbed form of iron.
Say that again?
And then bisglycinate, it's Bisglycinat. And then for anybody who does eat anything outside of fish too, red meats are going to be one of your best sources of getting iron in. And it doesn't mean you have to eat a ton of it, but it's going to be a really, really amazing source of heme iron. And then you could also go for like chicken thighs, your darker white meats. Those are going to be really great sources as well too.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I was told. Like when I stopped eating meat, I think it made the situation even more worse. I think the meat was helping me stay at a good level. And I also lost a lot of weight too. When I stopped eating meat, I guess my iron had nothing to absorb at this point, and my body was trying to compensate because I didn't lose a tremendous amount of weight, but I was smaller than I really wanted to be. So
iron helps get oxygen to your cells too, so that definitely helps your energy levels.
Well, I had a lot. The energy wasn't, he said, my doctor was like, one of these days, I think you were going to faint because I'm always doing so much. And he says, the fact that you weren't tired is amazing to me because your body probably was trying to overcompensate. But one of these days, you literally was going to be on the job and faint because your body wasn't going to be able to take it anymore. So, yeah, definitely. So before we go today, we're going to go with 3 things that you're going to leave us. Number 1. Through the things that you have gone through in your life, when it came through the irregular periods, your nutrition, you being overweight. We live in a generation now, Brooke, that's huge. Little girls especially, I feel like the media now, man, your body has to be pure perfection. What message do you have for the young ladies out there, probably entering into that young prime age, just got their period, they're on social media, they're seeing all this stuff and have all this expectation of what their body should be? You as a nutritionist, what advice do you have for them?
The biggest thing I always say is, the old school, don't judge a book by the cover. The biggest thing I always say is like, what you see is not what you get all the time. We always say, like, we say what you see is what you get. That's actually not the truth. The best thing that's helped me through, we all have probably like those moments of insecurity, especially with social media out there, is to keep in mind that like what you're seeing on the face value is not always what that person has going on behind the scenes. And you never know what somebody's story is. You never know what they've been through. And you really don't know if the reason they're being mean is because they're struggling internally themselves. Maybe they're actually jealous of what you have. Who knows? But you always have to assess. It doesn't matter what people are seeing on the outward of me. It matters of what I'm actually feeling inside. And that's the most important part. I know way too many people who their lives look amazing on social media, and behind the scenes, they are struggling. They are not in a good place. And it is not what you're seeing on the cover. So I would rather have a really amazing life behind social media and not look so great on the outside of it.
Wonderful. Very simply well put. Very simply well put. Don't judge a book by its cover, because sometimes what you see is not the reality at all. Second,
Yeah. Yeah.
as a woman who has lost a parent, and you honestly said that you went through PTSD with that because it was pretty drastic, not like you knew it was coming. What advice do you have for that? For someone who possibly is going through it even right now?
Yeah. Um, you have to be patient. No one's grieving process is the same. Um, I remember so many people telling me like, well, you need to be strong for your mom and you need to be here for her. And I just remember in those moments thinking like, well, what about me? Like who needs to be strong for me? No one, everyone was kind of undervaluing what that I was going through it too. And,
Mm-hmm.
um, you need to really honor what you need. You need to set boundaries. This is like the one time in your life where you actually really should be selfish with
Mm-hmm.
your time and what you need and prioritize that over anything. Um, I was so concerned about work and all that. After that, work didn't matter nearly as
Mm-hmm.
much. And I just say, like, really evaluate what matters the most. Know that the grieving process is never done, but that never means that you're not going to feel joy again. It doesn't mean you can't feel the duality of it, that you can't look back at amazing memories and be happy and miss them at the same time. Your life will move forward and you will have so many more amazing things happen. Um, the biggest thing I would say is just remember that this is just a chapter,
Mm-hmm.
and how you come out of that chapter, you can either stay stuck in that or you can take that really horrible thing that you went through and you can help other people through those too.
Wonderful. Be patient. Remember, there is no expiration on grief, and no one
Yep.
has a right to tell you when it starts and when it finishes. The
Yep.
last thing, what inspirational message do you have as a nutritionist when it comes to all the women out there who are on a diet? More than half of us probably diet. I don't diet, girl. I eat anything and everything, which is a problem. I shouldn't say I'd eat anything and everything, but I have one life and I'm going to eat that ice cream if I want it. That's the mentality that I have. But there are
Yeah.
many women out there that, is it low fat? I can't have it. Girl, what message do you have for them?
I'm a little bit of a tough love coach. I always tell people, I'm like, you are in control.
Yeah.
No one's telling you you can't have that ice cream. You're telling yourself you can't have it. So the second you remind yourself that you are in control
Mhm.
of your food, your body's actually an amazing thing and it tells you what it needs if you listen to it. You just need to flip that mindset and essentially, like in the most tough love way, get out of your own way and remember that you're in the driver's seat and you're making your own choices. It's not that you can't have that, it's that you don't want that. And if you do want it, eat it. And if you don't want it, you don't have to. I think we very often try to make our choices based on what somebody else is going to think of our choice. Worry about yourself because it's only your body that you're impacting.
Absolutely. You are in control, and your body does tell you what it wants, what it needs, the attention that you should give it. But we like to put responsibility on somebody else or something else, or, say, that's not good for my thighs. My butt's going to be even bigger if I eat that. Not if you eat one. Now, if you eat 10, that's a whole different conversation. If you're having an ice cream every day after work, okay, that's your own damn problem. But one ice cream for the month, you can't possibly tell me your thighs are going to be stretching out that much. But this is what women do.
Yeah.
But I like that. You are in control, which is very, very true. So, as we end today's episode, we have a few things. So, number one, Brooke says, don't judge a book by its cover. And that is very true. Sometimes what you see on the outside is what the person is not. Sometimes what you see on the outside is not what's happening on the inside, is what I'm trying to say. Because that book may look really good and fine and perfect. But guess what? You can open that book up and somebody has literally tore a big hole in there and is using it as a keepsake for like some damn locket. And you're looking at it like, I'm ready to read this book. Hell no, you're not, because ain't nothing to read. So don't judge a book by its cover. Two, be patient with yourself when it comes to anything in life. But in this situation, the grieving process, remember there's no expiration date and no one has a right to tell you when you need to be over your grief. Grief doesn't end. What we do as humans is we figure out how to move on, how to go on, and how to live our lives. Healing, I feel as though, as I always say this, you're never going to be at 100% when you're healing. You're never going to be at 100%. You may get to a comfortable number like 80% and try to strive towards 85 and 90. And there are days that are going to be good and days that are going to be bad. And last one is you are in control. In this episode, we're talking about food. So if you want that ice cream, ladies, eat it. If you want to have a pancake in the morning, eat it. Now, of course, we didn't get into this, but everything works in moderation, portion control, which we didn't even talk about. But shit, you have one fucking life. So like really, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Eat the goddamn ice cream. So as we end today, Brooke, I want to thank you for being a guest. You provided us with really phenomenal information. And I'm going to really tell you what really sparked me is poop and sex. I have to make sure I'm pooping on a regular basis so my sex drive stays good and intact. Okay? So as you always know, guys, thank you for listening. And remember to love yourself, voice yourself, and be yourself. To the next podcast, have a great one. Thanks for tuning in to Femme Parler Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.